The emergency transmission crackled through the void of space, carrying with it the desperation of a dying civilization. On the bridge of the Galactic Council monitoring station, Harmony's voice. Communications Officer Zektar's four eyes widened as the signal's strength peaked beyond anything they had recorded in decades. "By the 7 moons," Zektar whispered, their tentacles dancing across the control interface with practiced efficiency. "This is a Class 9 distress signal." Commander Yilneth, a tall, graceful Vellani with silver skin that shimmered under the bridge's soft lighting, moved swiftly to the communications station. Her species had evolved on a world of perpetual twilight, making them natural coordinators in crisis situations. "Show me the source coordinates." The holographic display materialized above them, showing a 3-dimensional map of their local galactic sector. A pulsing red dot blinked frantically in the Kepler arm, roughly 47 light-years from their current position. "It's the Jekti system," Zektar reported, their voice trembling slightly. "Home to the Renari Republic. Population, approximately 8 billion souls across 3 worlds. Yilneth felt her stomach drop. She knew the Renari well, a peaceful species of insect-like beings who had contributed greatly to galactic medicine and agriculture. They were gardeners and healers, not warriors. Their delicate, crystalline wing structures made them beautiful but fragile, and their society had never developed significant military capabilities. "What's the nature of the emergency?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. Zektar's tentacles moved rapidly across the controls, filtering through layers of static and interference. "Massive invasion force. Unknown origin. The transmission. Commander, they're requesting immediate military assistance. They say their defense fleet was destroyed in the first wave." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the station's systems. Every member of the crew knew what this meant. The Galactic Council's military response protocols were clear, but limited. They could dispatch a peacekeeping force, perhaps 3 or 4 ships, within a standard galactic week. For a full-scale invasion, especially one that had already overwhelmed the Renari's defenses, it would be far too little, far too late. "Send the standard emergency response," Yilneth ordered, though her heart felt heavy with the futility of it. "Alert the Council Defense Fleet and begin mobilization procedures for a humanitarian aid package." "Commander," interrupted Navigator Tholek, his rocky granite folk features etched with concern, "the Council Defense Fleet's nearest battle group is currently engaged in the Outer Rim conflicts. Earliest response time would be 12 days. 12 days. Yilneth knew that in 12 days there would likely be nothing left of the Renari Republic but empty worlds and bitter memories. She had seen this pattern before. The Council's bureaucratic response times were measured in weeks and months, not the hours and days that true emergencies demanded. "There is another option," Zektar said quietly, their voice barely audible above the bridge's ambient sounds. Yilneth turned to face the communications officer. "Speak." "The human monitoring station in the Sol system. They maintain a military frequency for emergency broadcasts. It's unconventional, but their treaties with the Council do include mutual defense clauses." A ripple of unease passed through the bridge crew. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about humans and their homeworld, Earth. A death world so hostile that it had forged its inhabitants into something unprecedented in galactic history. Humans were the only known species to have achieved spaceflight, while their planet was still actively trying to kill them through natural disasters, predators, diseases, and countless other hazards. Most galactic citizens viewed humans with a mixture of respect and fear. They were undeniably effective, but their methods often seemed excessive to species that had evolved on gentler worlds. When humans solved problems, they tended to solve them permanently and with what other species considered overwhelming force. "You're suggesting we contact the humans directly?" Yilneth asked. "Their response times are exceptional," Zektar admitted. And their military capabilities are well documented, if somewhat extensive. Yilneth considered this. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 37 years ago, but in that time, they had already gained a reputation for decisive action. When the Kurgan pirates had threatened shipping lanes in the Centauri cluster, the Council had spent months debating response strategies. The humans had simply arrived, eliminated the pirate fleet in a single engagement, and restored order within a week. When the plague had struck the agricultural worlds of the Theta sector, the Council had formed committees to study the problem. The humans had immediately dispatched medical ships, shared their research freely, and had a cure distributed within a month. The pattern was always the same. Other species deliberated, humans acted. Another burst of static from the Renari transmission brought Yilneth back to the present. Through the interference, she could hear the sounds of battle in the background, the high-pitched keening of Renari in distress, and what sounded like explosions. Anyone receiving last major population center under siege, defense grid failing, children's evacuation ships under direct attack. Children. The word hit Yilneth like a physical blow. She thought of her own offspring, safe in the nursery pools of her homeworld, and made her decision. Open a channel to the human monitoring station, she commanded. Priority Alpha emergency frequency. Zektar hesitated for just a moment, then began working at their console. Channel opening, Commander. We're connected to Sol System Defense Command. The response was almost instantaneous, which surprised Yilneth. Most species required several minutes to establish communications protocols and verify credentials. The human voice that came through the speakers was crisp, professional, and somehow conveying urgency even through the translation matrix. Sol Defense Command Admiral Chen speaking. We're reading your emergency beacon. What's your situation? Yilneth straightened her posture, drawing on her diplomatic training. Admiral Chen, this is Commander Yilneth of Galactic Council Monitoring Station, Harmony's voice. We have received a Class 9 distress signal from the Renari Republic in the Jekti system. Massive invasion force, unknown origin. Civilian population of 8 billion under direct threat. We're requesting immediate assistance under the mutual defense provisions of the Terra Council Accords. There was a pause, but not the lengthy deliberation Yilneth had expected. Instead, she heard the rapid clicking of human input devices and what sounded like multiple voices conferring quickly in the background. Commander Yilneth, Admiral Chen's voice returned. We're pulling up the tactical situation now. Renari Republic, Jekti system, correct? We show 3 inhabited worlds, Renari Prime, Jekti Minor, and the agricultural station at Jekti Tertius. That's correct, Admiral. And you said the invasion force is of unknown origin. Any intelligence on ship types, numbers, or tactical capabilities? Yilneth looked to Zektar, who quickly consulted their displays. The Renari transmissions mention vessels of unfamiliar design, estimated fleet strength of at least 200 ships, including several of capital ship classification. They broke through the Renari defense grid in less than 6 hours. Another pause, then Admiral Chen's voice returned with what Yilneth could only describe as grim determination. Commander, we're going to need you to relay our response to the Renari and keep this channel open for coordination. Can you do that? Of course, Admiral. Good. Tell them that help is coming. And tell them to hold their positions if at all possible. We're implementing immediate response protocols. Yilneth felt a flutter of hope, but also concern. Admiral, I should mention that our own Council Defense Fleet won't be able to respond for approximately 12 days. Will you be able to provide meaningful assistance with whatever forces you can deploy quickly? The pause this time was longer, and when Admiral Chen spoke again, Yilneth detected something in the human's voice that she couldn't quite identify. It might have been surprise, or perhaps something else entirely. Commander Yilneth, I think there may be a misunderstanding about human response protocols. When we say we're implementing immediate response, we don't mean sending a scouting force or a few ships. The Renari called for help, and 8 billion innocent lives are at stake. I understand, Admiral, but— Commander, Admiral Chen interrupted, though not impolitely. Humans don't send token forces to genocides. We don't dispatch aid packages to species facing extinction. When someone calls for help and children are dying, we don't send a few ships. The Admiral's voice took on a tone that made the entire bridge crew stop what they were doing and listen. We send fleets! Before Yilneth could respond, her sensors operator, Cries, called out in a voice filled with disbelief. Commander, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the Sol system. Multiple hyperspace jump preparations. By the ancestors. How many ships do the humans have? Yilneth looked at the tactical display that Crixtal had thrown onto the main screen. The Sol system, normally showing a handful of defense platforms and patrol craft, was lighting up like a celebration festival. Energy signatures were appearing throughout the system, not just near Earth, but around Mars, the asteroid belt, the outer planets, and even what appeared to be hidden facilities in the outer dark. Admiral, Yilneth said, her voice carefully controlled, our sensors are detecting significant fleet movements in your system. Exactly how many ships are you preparing to deploy? Commander, we're mobilizing the 3rd, 7th, and 9th battle groups from our home defense fleet, plus the 2nd Expeditionary Force from Mars Command and the Rapid Response Fleet from Europa Station. Additionally, we're activating reserve squadrons from the Belt Mining Consortium and calling up colonial defense volunteers from the outer system. Each designation Admiral Chen listed caused Yilneth's understanding of human military organization to expand dramatically. This wasn't a military mobilization. It was the awakening of an entire war machine that had been quietly existing alongside human civilian society. Total deployment will be approximately 837 ships of the line, plus support vessels, carrier groups, and auxiliary craft. Estimated total fleet strength, just over 1,500 ships. The bridge fell dead silent. 1,500 ships. The entire Galactic Council defense fleet, if every ship from every member world were assembled in one location, might field 400 vessels. The humans were casually mobilizing nearly 4 times that number for a single rescue mission. Admiral, Yilneth said weakly, that's an entire armada. No, Commander, Admiral Chen replied, and now Yilneth could definitely identify the tone in the human's voice. It was the quiet, confident menace of a predator that had decided something was going to die. That's a Tuesday. Through the static of the Renari transmission, another burst of desperate communication broke through. Orbital platforms destroyed, invasion fleet landing troops on the surface. They're targeting the nursery colonies first. Admiral Chen's voice cut through the transmission like a blade. Commander Yilneth, please relay the following message to any Renari forces still in communication. Terran Fleet Command has received your distress call. Help is en route. Hold your positions, protect your civilians, and do whatever you have to do to keep your people alive. The cavalry is coming. Yilneth found herself struggling to process what she was witnessing. In her long career with the Galactic Council, she had seen many military responses to crisis situations. There were always debates, assessments, risk calculations, and careful deployment of limited resources. What she was seeing from the humans was something entirely different, an instant, overwhelming commitment that seemed to ignore conventional strategic thinking. Admiral, if I may ask, what is your estimated time of arrival at the Jekti system? Our fastest battle groups should arrive in approximately 14 hours, Commander. The main force will be there in 18 hours. We're also dispatching hospital ships, supply vessels, and evacuation carriers in case we need to relocate the civilian population. 14 hours. The humans would arrive nearly 11 days before the Council's own forces. But more than that, They would arrive with such overwhelming force that whatever was threatening the Renari would face not just resistance, but total annihilation. Yilneth realized she was witnessing something that would likely become legend in the galactic community. She was seeing humanity's response to a cry for help, and it was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. The humans, it seemed, didn't just help. They brought entire fleets, overwhelming force, and the absolute certainty that anyone who threatened innocent lives would learn why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its inhabitants were the most feared warriors in the galaxy. As alarms began sounding throughout the human transmission, indicating the beginning of their fleet mobilization, Yilneth could only whisper, "The Renari don't know what's coming to save them." From the speakers, Admiral Chen's voice carried the promise of humanity itself. They will. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, flagship of the 3rd Battle Group, watching the hyperspace countdown with practiced calm. Around her, the bridge crew worked with the efficient precision that had become humanity's trademark throughout the galaxy. Unlike the elaborate ceremonial bridges favored by other species, human warship bridges were functional spaces designed for one purpose: winning battles. "Fleet status report," she commanded. "All ships report ready for hyperspace transition, Admiral," replied Commander Torres from the tactical station. "Total force, 1,537 ships across all battle groups. Hospital ships and evacuation transports are standing by in the secondary wave." Admiral Chen nodded, her eyes fixed on the main display showing the assembled human fleet. Even after 30 years of service, the sight never failed to impress her. The sleek, angular lines of human warships were purposeful and deadly, designed by a species that had learned warfare in the brutal school of a world that constantly tried to kill them. The lead ships were the heavy cruisers and battleships, massive vessels bristling with kinetic cannons, plasma batteries, and missile arrays. Behind them came the carriers, each one holding squadrons of fighters and bombers that could deliver devastating strikes with precision. Destroyers and frigates formed the outer screening elements, their sensors reaching deep into space, while support vessels maintained the supply lines that kept human fleets operating far from home. "Admiral," called out Communications Officer Park, "we're receiving updates from the advanced scout drones we deployed 6 hours ago. The situation at Jekti is severe." The main display shifted to show the tactical situation in the Renari system. Chen's jaw tightened as she absorbed the intelligence. The invasion fleet was massive and clearly organized, with standardized vessel designs that suggested a unified military force rather than pirates or raiders. Worse, their tactics showed they were specifically targeting civilian populations. "Analysis suggests the invading force consists of approximately 240 ships," Park continued. "Heavy emphasis on troop transports and bombardment vessels. Their technology level appears roughly equivalent to Council standard military grade." "And the Renari forces?" Chen asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "Effectively eliminated, Admiral. We're detecting scattered resistance groups on the surface, but their orbital defense platforms were destroyed in the first 6 hours of the invasion. The enemy is currently conducting systematic bombardment of major population centers." Chen felt the familiar cold anger that came whenever she encountered this kind of senseless brutality. Humans had learned long ago that survival often meant violence, but they had also learned to direct that violence at those who deserved it. The targeting of civilians, especially children, triggered something primal in human psychology. "Time to hyperspace transition?" 30 seconds, Admiral." Chen activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "This is Admiral Chen to all ships. In 30 seconds, we're going to emerge in a system where 8 billion innocent beings are fighting for their lives against an enemy that targets children and civilians. The enemy chose this fight. They chose to attack peaceful people who never threatened anyone. They chose to make themselves our problem." She paused, knowing that across 1,500 ships, Human crews were listening with the same cold determination she felt. Today, they're going to learn why that was a mistake. All ships, prepare for hyperspace transition. The universe twisted around them as the massive human fleet entered hyperspace. For 14 hours, they traveled through dimensions that human science barely understood but had mastered well enough to traverse. During the journey, battle plans were refined, weapons were checked and rechecked, and crews prepared for what was to come. When the fleet emerged at the edge of the HFY system, the tactical picture was even worse than the scout drones had reported. The beautiful blue-green world of Renari Prime showed the orange glow of fires across entire continents. The agricultural stations of HFY Tertius were dark, their orbital installations shattered ruins drifting in space. "My God," whispered Commander Torres. "They're not just invading, they're systematically destroying everything." "Admiral," called out the sensor operator, "the invasion fleet is maintaining position around Renari Prime. They're using the planet as a shield, keeping the civilian population between them and any potential rescue force." It was a common tactic used by species that didn't understand human psychology. Many galactic civilizations would hesitate to engage in such a situation, unwilling to risk civilian casualties in a rescue operation. The invaders had clearly calculated that any rescue attempt would be cautious and measured. They had never fought humans before. "Launch all reconnaissance drones," Admiral Chen ordered. "I want detailed scans of every ship in that fleet and real-time intelligence on troop deployments planetside. Signal the hospital ships to maintain position at the hyperspace limit. They're not to advance until we've secured the system." "Ma'am," reported the communications officer, "we're receiving transmissions from surviving Renari forces on the planet. They're requesting immediate evacuation assistance for civilian populations trapped in the major cities." Admiral Chen studied the tactical display, her mind processing dozens of variables simultaneously. The invasion fleet had positioned itself cleverly, using the planet's gravity well and the presence of civilians to limit the options of any rescue force. It was a strategy that might have worked against other species. But humans had been fighting dirty opponents on an unforgiving world for millennia before they reached the stars. They had learned to win battles where losing meant extinction, and they had developed tactics that other species found disturbingly effective. "Signal all battle groups," Admiral Chen commanded. "We're implementing Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was a human tactical doctrine that had been developed during the colonial expansion period, when human forces often faced numerically superior enemies who used civilian populations as shields. It was devastatingly effective but required precision, coordination, and the kind of calculated risk-taking that most species found psychologically impossible. The human fleet began to move with the smooth coordination of an organism that had evolved for war. The battle groups separated, approaching the system from multiple vectors while maintaining precise timing. Long-range missiles began launching from specialized bombardment ships, their trajectories calculated to the millimeter to avoid any risk to the planet below, while targeting enemy vessels in high orbit. "First wave missiles away," reported Torres. "Impact in 4 minutes, 17 seconds. The enemy fleet, which had been maintaining their shield formation around Renari Prime, suddenly found themselves facing an impossible tactical situation. The humans weren't approaching cautiously from a single direction. They were coming from everywhere at once, with weapons that could thread the needle between enemy ships and planetary surfaces with surgical precision. Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as the enemy commander tried to respond to the human attack. Their ships began moving to intercept the approaching battle groups, but they were forced to maintain enough vessels around the planet to prevent the humans from simply bypassing them entirely. "Enemy fleet is splitting up," Torres observed. "Approximately 60 ships moving to engage our primary battle group. Another 40 moving to intercept the flanking forces. That leaves 140 ships still positioned around the planet," Chen noted with satisfaction. "Signal all units. Commence Phase 2. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for decades to come. The human battle groups that appeared to be the main attack force suddenly revealed themselves as diversions. While the enemy fleet moved to engage them, the real assault came from an entirely different direction. Human stealth ships, which had been deployed hours earlier during the hyperspace journey, emerged from the shadow of Jekti's moons. These specialized vessels carried the kind of weaponry that could only be developed by a species that had grown up on a world where everything was trying to kill them. Precision kinetic bombardment systems that could thread through a fleet formation and strike specific targets without affecting anything else in the vicinity. The first salvo eliminated every enemy ship that was directly above population centers on Renari Prime. The kinetic rounds, traveling at significant fractions of light speed, punched through enemy hulls and continued into space without causing any planetary damage. It was the kind of precision shooting that required not just advanced technology, but the reflexes and spatial awareness of hunters who had evolved in three-dimensional forest canopies. "Jesus Christ," breathed one of the bridge officers as the tactical display updated. 37 enemy ships eliminated in the first strike. But the humans weren't finished. As the enemy fleet scrambled to respond to this new threat, the diversionary battle groups revealed their true purpose. Instead of engaging the enemy ships that had moved to intercept them, they launched clouds of specialized drones that spread throughout the system. These drones weren't weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, they were sophisticated electronic warfare platforms that began systematically infiltrating enemy communications and sensor networks. Within minutes, the invasion fleet found their coordination disrupted, their sensors feeding them false information, and their command structure effectively blinded. "Admiral," reported the intelligence officer, "our drones have penetrated their command network. We have real-time access to their communications and tactical planning." The enemy was now facing a uniquely human nightmare. They were fighting an opponent who could see everything they were doing while remaining largely invisible themselves. Human military doctrine had been shaped by millions of years of evolution as persistence hunters, and they had translated those instincts into space warfare with terrifying effectiveness. "Sir," the communications officer called out, "the enemy commander is attempting to broadcast surrender terms." Admiral Chen looked at the display showing the systematic destruction of Renari cities that had continued even after the human fleet arrived. Her expression was stone. "Negative. No surrender accepted from forces that target civilians. Continue the operation." What followed was less a battle than a systematic dismantling of the invasion fleet. Human ships moved through the enemy formation like apex predators, their weapons targeting command vessels, troop transports, and bombardment ships with clinical efficiency. Every shot was calculated, every movement planned to minimize risk to the civilian population below while maximizing damage to the enemy. The few enemy ships that managed to return fire discovered another unpleasant truth about human military design. Human warships were built by engineers who had learned their trade on a world where natural disasters were routine. They were over-engineered, redundant, and capable of continuing to fight even after sustaining damage that would cripple vessels from more peaceful worlds. "Enemy force down to 43 ships," Torres reported. "They're attempting to break orbit and retreat." "Negative," Admiral Chen replied. "Signal the outer battle groups to intercept. No ship that participated in the bombardment of civilians leaves this system." The human fleet moved to envelop the remaining enemy vessels, cutting off every escape route with the kind of tactical coordination that came from generations of military experience. The humans had learned warfare in the school of survival, and they had graduated with honors. As the last enemy ship was destroyed, Admiral Chen opened a channel to the surviving Renari forces on the planet below. "Renari Prime, this is Admiral Chen of the Terran Fleet. The invasion force has been eliminated. We're deploying medical teams and evacuation ships to provide assistance. Your people are safe." The response came through heavy static, but the emotion was unmistakable. "Human ships. You came so fast. We thought everyone would die." "Nobody dies on our watch," Admiral Chen replied simply. "We're sending hospital ships down now. Just hold on a little longer." As human vessels began the complex task of providing humanitarian aid to the devastated Renari worlds, Admiral Chen reflected on the operation. From the initial distress call to the destruction of the last enemy ship, the entire engagement had lasted less than 6 hours. 1,500 human ships had traveled across 47 light years, destroyed a fleet of over 200 enemy vessels, and were now providing medical aid and evacuation services to 8 billion traumatized civilians. It was the kind of response that would have taken other galactic civilizations months to organize and execute. But then, other galactic civilizations hadn't evolved on Earth. They hadn't learned to fight for survival against everything from natural disasters to predator species. They hadn't developed the kind of military-industrial complex that could mobilize overwhelming force in response to a single distress call. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we're receiving messages from all across the galaxy. Word of the operation is spreading fast." Admiral Chen nodded. She suspected this engagement would change how the galaxy viewed humanity's role in interstellar affairs. The Galactic Council had seen humans as useful allies with effective military capabilities. After today, they would understand that humans weren't just another member species. They were the cavalry. And when innocent people called for help, the cavalry always came in overwhelming force. "Signal Fleet Command," Admiral Chen ordered. "Mission accomplished. Beginning humanitarian operations." 3 weeks after the Battle of Jekti, as historians were already calling it, Ambassador Yilneth stood before the assembled Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. The circular amphitheater held representatives from over 400 species, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, chirps, telepathic whispers, and translated speech that normally indicated the vibrant diversity of galactic civilization. Today, however, the chamber was unusually quiet as they waited for her report on what many were already calling the most significant military action since the formation of the Council itself. "Honored representatives," Yilneth began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. "I have just returned from the Jekti system, where I witnessed the aftermath of humanity's response to the Renari Republic's distress call." She activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber, showing images from the battle site. The assembled delegates leaned forward, their attention focused on the evidence of what humans were capable of when innocents were threatened. The human fleet consisted of 1,537 ships, she continued. They traveled 47 light years in 14 hours, engaged and destroyed an invasion force of 240 vessels in less than 6 hours, and immediately began humanitarian operations that saved approximately 7 billion Renari lives. A ripple of amazement passed through the chamber. The Thraxian delegate, their insectoid features clicking in what Yilneth recognized as astonishment, spoke first. "Ambassador Yilneth, are you certain of these numbers? Our intelligence services indicated that the human military maintained perhaps 50 ships of the line for their home defense." Yilneth had been expecting this question. Before the Battle of Jekti, most species had dramatically underestimated human military capabilities. It had been a comfortable delusion, allowing them to think of humans as useful, but not threatening allies. "Honored delegate, those 50 ships represent only the visible portion of humanity's home defense fleet. What we witnessed was the mobilization of their deep space naval reserves, colonial defense forces, and what they term their rapid response capability." She changed the holographic display to show the tactical analysis that human officers had shared with her. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed the implications of what they were seeing. The humans maintain a distributed military infrastructure throughout their solar system and colonial territories. When they speak of fleet elements, they're referring to self-sufficient naval forces that can operate independently for extended periods. The force that responded to the Renari distress call represented approximately 30% of their total naval capability. The silence that followed was profound. If 1,500 ships represented 30% of human naval strength, then humanity commanded a military force larger than the rest of the galaxy combined. The Coralline ambassador, their crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns, asked the question that everyone was thinking. Ambassador Yilneth, are we to understand that humanity has been concealing the true extent of their military power from the Council? Before Yilneth could answer, the chamber's central communication array activated, and the familiar figure of Admiral Sarah Chen appeared in holographic projection. The human admiral looked as composed as she had during the battle, but Yilneth noticed the exhaustion around her eyes that spoke of weeks spent coordinating massive humanitarian operations. "Honored Council members," Admiral Chen began, "I understand there are questions about human military capabilities and our intentions regarding galactic security. I've been authorized by the Terran government to address these concerns directly." The human admiral's presence seemed to fill the chamber, despite being only a projection. There was something about her bearing that reminded every delegate present that they were speaking with a representative of the species that had just demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. First, humanity has never concealed our military capabilities from the Council. Our defense arrangements and fleet strengths have been reported accurately in all required documentation. The confusion appears to arise from different interpretations of what constitutes military force. Admiral Chen activated her own holographic display, showing organizational charts that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Most species maintain military forces as a separate institution from their civilian infrastructure. Humans evolved differently. Our military capabilities are distributed throughout our entire society. Our merchant marine vessels are built to military standards and can be armed within hours. Our civilian defense contractors maintain production facilities that can switch from consumer goods to military hardware as needed. Our colonial infrastructure includes defensive capabilities as standard equipment. The implications of this hit the chamber like a physical blow. Every human civilian ship they had seen, every trade vessel, every colonization transport had been designed by a species that assumed conflict was inevitable. When the Renari called for help, Admiral Chen continued, we didn't mobilize our military to respond to a foreign crisis. We mobilized our society to protect innocents. The 1,500 ships that responded included naval vessels, armed merchant ships, volunteer colonial defense forces, and converted civilian craft operated by citizens who heard that children were dying and chose to act. Ambassador Yilneth felt a chill as she understood what Admiral Chen was really saying. The overwhelming force that had saved the Renari hadn't been a military deployment in the traditional sense. It had been an entire civilization choosing to act as one. The Villani High Counselor, ancient and respected for their diplomatic wisdom, asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. Admiral Chen, what does humanity want from the galaxy? With such overwhelming military capability, you could dominate the Council, impose your will on any world, take whatever resources you desired. Why do you choose to act as protectors instead of conquerors? Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly, and for a moment she looked less like a military commander and more like a teacher explaining something important to students who were struggling to understand. Honored Counselor, I think that question reflects a fundamental misunderstanding about human psychology and culture. We didn't develop our military capabilities to dominate others. We developed them because our home world tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. The display changed to show images of Earth. Massive hurricanes, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis, and predator species that had shaped human evolution through constant conflict. Humans learned warfare as a survival skill, not as a tool for conquest. We became excellent at violence because anything that wasn't excellent at violence died. But we also learned that the strongest communities were those that protected their weakest members. We survived as a species because we cooperated, not because we dominated. Admiral Chen paused, allowing the Council to absorb this perspective. When we reached the stars and found a galaxy full of peaceful species, our first instinct wasn't to conquer them. It was to protect them. Every human who heard the Renari distress call understood instinctively that 8 billion innocents were facing extinction. We responded the way we've always responded to such threats, with everything we had. The chamber remained silent as delegates processed this information. Finally, the Renari ambassador, who had remained quiet throughout the session, spoke in the musical tones of their species. Honored council members, I have been authorized to speak on behalf of the Renari Republic regarding humanity's intervention in our system. The human fleet that saved our people provided not only military protection, but immediate humanitarian aid. Their hospital ships treated our wounded, their evacuation vessels relocated civilian populations from threatened areas, and their engineering teams are currently helping us rebuild our infrastructure. The Renari ambassador's wings shimmered with emotion as they continued. But most importantly, once the threat was eliminated, they asked nothing from us in return. No territorial concessions, no resource rights, no political influence. They simply helped us begin to heal and informed us that they would maintain a patrol presence in our system until we felt secure enough to manage our own defense. This revelation struck the Council with particular force. Military interventions typically came with costs, political influence, resource extraction rights, or strategic advantages for the intervening power. The humans had deployed overwhelming force, saved an entire civilization, and then asked for nothing but the opportunity to help with reconstruction. The Corellan ambassador, their crystalline form now glowing with what Yilnith recognized as deep contemplation, spoke slowly. Admiral Chen, if I may ask directly, what would humanity's response be if Council worlds faced similar threats in the future? Admiral Chen's answer was immediate and unequivocal. The same response we gave the Renari. When innocents call for help, humans answer. It's who we are. But surely, pressed the Thraxian delegate, there must be limits to this commitment. Your resources, while vast, are not infinite. Your people must have other priorities, other concerns. Admiral Chen smiled, and Yilnith realized it was the first time she had seen the humans show genuine amusement during their interactions. Honored delegate, you're thinking about this like a traditional military power calculating cost-benefit ratios. Humans don't view protecting innocents as an economic decision. It's a moral imperative that transcends normal political calculations. She activated a final display showing the current disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy. As we speak, human patrol fleets are establishing regular routes through systems with limited defensive capabilities. Our deep space monitoring stations are sharing intelligence about potential threats with local governments. Our hospital ships are providing medical aid to colony worlds that lack adequate healthcare infrastructure. The scope of human activities was staggering. While the Council had been debating the implications of the Jekti incident, humanity had quietly begun implementing a galaxy-wide protection network that rivaled the Council's own peacekeeping efforts. Admired Admiral, the High Counselor said carefully, this represents a significant shift in the balance of galactic power. How does humanity view its relationship with the Council going forward? Admiral Chen's expression became serious again. We view the Council as partners in maintaining galactic peace and protecting innocent lives. We have no desire to replace or dominate the Council. We want to work with you to ensure that what happened to the Renari doesn't happen to anyone else. She paused, and when she continued, Her voice carried the weight of humanity's collective determination. But we want to be clear about our position. If someone threatens innocent civilians, we will respond. If someone commits genocide, we will stop them. If someone preys on the peaceful species of this galaxy, they will face the consequences. This isn't a threat to the Council or its members. It's a promise to anyone who might think that isolation or distance will protect them from justice. The session ended with delegates from across the galaxy struggling to process what they had learned. Humanity, the species they had welcomed as useful allies, had revealed themselves to be the dominant military power in the galaxy. But rather than using that power for conquest or exploitation, they had chosen to become protectors. As Ambassador Yilnith prepared her final report, she reflected on the transformation she had witnessed. 3 weeks ago, the galaxy had seen humans as capable but limited partners in galactic affairs. Now they understood that humanity represented something unprecedented, a military power that grew stronger in response to threats against innocence rather than opportunities for expansion. The age of galactic politics as usual was over. In its place had emerged a new reality where 8 billion Renari lives had been saved not by careful diplomacy or calculated military intervention, but by the simple fact that when children were dying, humans responded with everything they had. And across the galaxy, species that had never heard of Earth were learning a new truth. When you called for help, the humans didn't just send aid ships or token forces or diplomatic protests. They sent fleets. And those fleets carried with them the promise that innocent lives mattered more than political calculations, that genocide would not be tolerated, and that the strongest military force in the galaxy belonged to a species that used that strength to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Deathworlders had made their choice. They would be the galaxy's guardians, whether the galaxy wanted guardians or not. But as reports from the Renari system continued to arrive, showing human medical teams working alongside Renari doctors, human engineers helping rebuild devastated cities, and human patrol ships quietly ensuring that no new threats emerged, it became clear that the galaxy not only wanted these guardians, it desperately needed them. The universe, it seemed, was a dangerous place. But for the first time in galactic history, innocent species didn't have to face that danger alone.